Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going deep on some stories from Germany and the Middle East.
Yeah, it should be pretty interesting. We've got a mix of politics and social commentary and even, well, a tragedy all kind of coming together.
Definitely a lot to unpack. We'll be looking at how individuals and groups are using their power or having their power used against them in a world that seems to be changing faster every day.
It's really a potent mix of events. They might seem unconnected at first, but as we go through them all, I think you'll start to see some links between them all.
I'm sure you're right. Okay, well, let's start in Germany with the Alternative for Germany Party, the AfD. They've been making headlines recently, and it looks like they're polling second ahead of the German elections.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising to a lot of folks. What's really got people talking is their strategy, though. They're using social media influencers, YouTubers, and TikTokers mostly, and it's working really well for them, especially with younger voters.
Yeah, it's a pretty big departure from the traditional ways of campaigning, for sure. Do you think we'll see more parties adopting these kinds of tactics?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we're already seeing it happen all over the world. Parties are really starting to recognize the power these platforms have. You can reach very specific groups of people that way, go around traditional media and really control how your message comes across. Like the AfD, for example, is using these online channels to talk about immigration and the EU. They're framing those complex issues in a way that appeals to the people they're trying to reach.
Right, and they aren't exactly shying away from controversy, are they? A lot of their online discussions are focused on these integration policies, and it leads to some pretty heated debates about national identity and what it means to belong in a country.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of their strategy. They're keeping themselves in the public eye by engaging in these discussions, even if they get pretty contentious. It keeps people talking about them and thinking about them.
It's definitely a calculated risk, but it seems to be working for them, at least as far as getting attention goes. But this is where things start to get a little concerning. There's also this simultaneous rise of a far-right youth movement happening in Germany. It's not just online chatter either. These are organized groups, and they have some pretty dangerous ideologies. Experts are warning about the potential for things like hate speech to increase, maybe even violence and social unrest if this trend continues.
It's a worrying situation for sure, and it's not just limited to Germany either. We're seeing similar things popping up across Europe and even further afield. These movements are exploiting social anxieties, like worries about the economy to gain support. It's a real reminder that the internet can be used to spread extremist ideologies
Yeah,
and that we all need to be really vigilant and intervene where we can.
absolutely. It's a sobering thought for sure.
Okay.
Well, let's move on to something a little bit more uplifting. A story that shows how art can be used to comment on society and start important conversations, even if they're a bit uncomfortable at times.
Right. So for this, we're going to look at Florian Menz. He's a German musician whose music videos have kind of blown up online. Millions of views and thousands of comments. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, his work is visually really striking, and he tackles some pretty sensitive topics head on. Things like women wearing headscarves in public and navigating gender equality issues as society changes around them. I find it really fascinating how he uses music to create this space for dialogue and reflection. He's not preaching, he's encouraging people to think critically and engage with these complex issues themselves.
I agree. That's exactly what makes his work so interesting. It's not just mindless entertainment. It's about challenging our assumptions and making us uncomfortable. He makes us ask ourselves difficult questions about identity, integration, what it means to be German in this century. It's a great example of how art can go beyond language and culture to start conversations across the globe.
It just goes to show that sometimes the most important conversations aren't happening in government buildings or universities, they're happening through art. But now we need to address a really tragic event that happened in Gaza. This story really emphasizes the human cost of conflict and how fragile peace really is.
Yeah, this was a prisoner swap deal that went terribly wrong.
Yeah.
A landmine exploded during a clearance operation and killed a 50-year-old villager named Shiri Bibas. He was a father and a grandfather, a real pillar of his community. His death has been a huge shock to the whole region.
It's even more heartbreaking because the swap was supposed to ease tensions and help build trust. The fact that something this awful could happen really makes you question the whole peace process.
And the details surrounding the incident just make it even more complicated. At first, people thought the mine was from Hamas, but it turns out both Hamas and Israel had used mines in the area, so it's impossible to say for sure who was responsible for Mr. Bibas's death. This lack of clarity has just made tensions worse and increased the distrust between both sides. which obviously puts the already fragile peace efforts at risk.
It's just a stark reminder that even when everyone wants peace, the road to get there is full of obstacles and setbacks. It shows how important transparency and accountability are, and that everyone involved needs to genuinely commit to peace. But thankfully, there is a little bit of hope coming out of Gaza amidst all this tragedy.
Oh, that's right. Hamas has just released 5 more hostages as part of a declaration they negotiated. Could be a sign that they're changing their stance on the whole hostage situation. This development has really caught the attention of the international community and it has sparked some, cautious optimism. People are hoping that it could lead to more dialogue and progress towards a lasting solution.
It's a small ray of light in what's otherwise a very dark and turbulent situation. It gives us a little bit of hope that even in conflicts that seem impossible to resolve, there's always a chance for peace. And that brings us to a really crucial question. How do we navigate a world where politics, social commentary, and tragedies like this all intersect in such significant ways?
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves. We need to understand the forces at play, both in our own communities and around the world. And we need to think about the part we play in shaping these narratives. It's about being informed, staying engaged, and challenging our own assumptions as we try to navigate this complex and ever-changing world. It's really interesting to see how the AFD is using these anxieties about immigration and the economy to their advantage. These are complicated issues that affect so many countries, not just Germany.
You're so right. It feels like everywhere you look these days, there are populist movements gaining ground by tapping into these same fears. Like people are looking for simple answers to these really complex problems, and these parties are offering solutions that seem, well, straightforward, even if they are divisive and oversimplified.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so important to look deeper, Beyond the slogans and the sound bites, we need to really examine the policies and the ideologies that these groups are pushing. The AFD's success is a real wake-up call for more traditional parties. They're going to have to find new ways to connect with voters if they want to stay relevant. They need to actually address people's concerns and come up with real viable solutions that promote unity, not fear and division.
It seems like the AFD's strategy is less about offering real solutions and more about exploiting divisions that already exist in society. They're playing on these fears people have about losing their national identity and the perceived threat of the other, which is a dangerous game to play and could have huge consequences.
You've hit the nail on the head there. When political discourse is dominated by fear and resentment, it creates an environment where extremism can thrive. And intolerance. It's a slippery slope that can lead to the erosion of democratic values and even, the rise of authoritarianism. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Which brings us back to the power of art to challenge these narratives. Florian Menzi and his music videos, they're a great example of how art can be used to start productive dialogues, even if they touch on controversial subjects. His work doesn't try to offer easy answers or push a particular agenda. It's all about encouraging people to reflect and grapple with these difficult issues in their own way.
Exactly. Art has a unique ability to go beyond the limits of typical political discourse. It can evoke emotions, challenge our assumptions, and help us understand each other better, in a way that speeches and debates often can't. Menzi's work shows how creative expression can spark real conversations and even inspire positive social change.
It's a good reminder that art can be a powerful force for building understanding between people, especially in a world that feels increasingly divided. But shifting gears back to Gaza, Shiri Babas's tragic death during the prisoner swap really highlights the terrible cost of conflict and just how difficult it is to find a path to peace.
Absolutely. It's a tragic reminder that even when peace is the goal, the journey to get there is filled with obstacles. The fact that both sides, Hamas and Israel, bear some responsibility for this tragedy just shows how deep the mistrust runs and how much the legacy of violence continues to affect the region.
Yeah. It feels like blame and retribution often overshadow any attempts at justice and reconciliation. It raises a fundamental question. How can we break free from this cycle of violence when the past weighs so heavily on the present?
That's the big question, isn't it? It would require a real shift in perspective. A willingness to move past the narratives of victimhood and blame, and a commitment to real dialogue, even with those we see as enemies.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even when we've been hurt by each other. And understanding that true peace needs more than just agreements on paper. It needs a change of heart, a change in the way we think.
Absolutely. It's a long and challenging process. You need patience, empathy, and a real belief in the possibility of a better future. The fact that Hamas released those 5 extra hostages, although it's a small step, it gives us a little bit of hope that even in conflicts that seem impossible to solve, there's still a chance for dialogue and maybe even reconciliation.
It reminds us that even when things seem incredibly bleak, we can't give up hope. Those moments of hope, however small, can give us the strength to keep striving for a more peaceful and just world. It really strikes me that all these stories we've talked about today, the AFD in Germany, Florian Menzies' music, the situation in Gaza, they all seem to point to this bigger ideal. We're all struggling with these questions of identity, belonging, figuring out what kind of future we want to build.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think all these events, even though they seem so different, are connected by this underlying tension between tradition and change, between hope and fear. In Germany, the AfD is tapping into that anxiety people feel, about losing traditional values as society changes so rapidly. But Florian Menzi, he's using his art to challenge those same ideas. He wants us to rethink what it means to be German in a modern, multicultural world. And in Gaza, that conflict is a tragic reminder of how powerful these old grudges can be and how difficult it can be to break free from cycles of violence.
And technology seems to be playing a big part in all of this. Social media especially, it's become this battleground for shaping the narrative, mobilizing support, but also often just making divisions worse.
Right. The digital world is totally intertwined with our political and social lives now. I mean, the AfD's success is largely down to how well they've used social media to go around traditional media and speak directly to voters. And Florian Menzi, his videos have gone viral. They've sparked these global conversations about identity. And in Gaza, both sides use social media to spread information, get support, and unfortunately, sometimes spread misinformation too.
So what does all this mean for us, the people listening? How can we make sense of this world that's so complex and constantly changing?
That's a question we all need to think about. It comes down to being informed, being critical thinkers. We have to question the narratives we're given, whether it's from politicians, the media, even artists. We need to be aware of our own biases and be open to hearing different perspectives, even if we disagree with them.
Yeah, it's about having those constructive conversations, online and in person. We need to understand that these problems are complex, and the solutions aren't going to be simple or come from divisive rhetoric. We need empathy, a willingness to understand each other, and a commitment to working together to build a world that's fairer for everyone.
And don't forget, sometimes inspiration comes from unexpected places. Florian Menzies' music, it reminds us that even when things are chaotic and uncertain, there's still beauty, there's creativity, there's hope. We all have a part to play in shaping the future, and every action we take, however small it seems, can make a difference.
That's a great point. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling, I don't know, cautiously optimistic, I guess. The challenges are definitely huge, but so is our capacity for change, for compassion, for resilience. The stories we've discussed today really show the power that individuals and communities have to make things better, whether it's through politics, art, or just being informed and engaged citizens.
And remember, the world is always changing. The future isn't set in stone. It's being shaped by our choices, our actions, and our willingness to engage with the complexities of our time.
Yeah.
So stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.